Unit 2, Lesson 2, Measuring Personality. Unit 2, Lesson 2, Vocabulary. After this presentation, we should be able to understand how to measure personality, identify the different approaches to measuring personality, know the difference between the do's and don'ts in personality testing, and understand the guidelines for administering psychological tests and how to provide feedback from those tests to athletes and exercisers. Psychologists distinguish between an individual's traits and states. Traits are a person's typical style of behaving. Questions and surveys ask how you typically or generally feel. Psychologists distinguish between an individual's traits and states, whereas states, or the situation's effects on behavior of an individual, these questions or surveys ask how you feel right now, at a particular moment in time, or at a specific situation. Psychologists also use situation-specific measures and sport-specific measures. The difference is that with situation-specific measures, psychologists can predict behavior better when they have more knowledge of the specific situation and the ways individuals respond to particular types of situations. Think about like fourth quarter shooting percentage in basketball or ninth inning save percentage in baseball. Because of the very specific situation, sports psychologists can get a better understanding of how people, based on their behavior and traits, will react in those situations. Sport specific measures of personality predict behavior in sports settings better than do general personality tests. Because baseball players might react differently than football players, team sport athletes react differently than individual sport athletes. Endurance athletes react differently than casual exercisers. Pre-game routines help athletes get focused, and they vary by athlete and their belief system. An athlete's personality can vary greatly during any athletic competition based on the situations. And an athlete's personality post-game usually reverts to who they are at their psychological core, their innate values of who they are. All psychological tests contain a degree of measurement error. It is important to use caution when interpreting their results and efficacy. Sports and exercise psychologists use tests, surveys, and questionnaires to study athletes and provide their assessment, but they must address certain questions about their tests. Consider when using psychological measures that these sports psychologists should know the principles of testing and measurement error. Test results are not absolute or irrefutable. That is, valid tests that have been used for decades may have measurement errors. Some of those common errors are confirmation bias or mismatched validity, low base rates, a financial bias, perfect conditions fallacy, confusing language, or predictive accuracy. There's also a principle known as the faking good principle. This is when people often answer questions with what they think would be a good answer, even though it's not a truthful answer. It is also critically important to know your limitations when using psychological measures, because individuals administering psychological tests needs special training, A, to give the tests, and more importantly, to interpret the results. The special training can include college training, certificates and degrees, graduate degrees and graduate fields of study, certificate training outside of an academic situation, and coursework, varied coursework throughout one's lifetime. It is important that sports teams, sport coaches, sport general managers, that they not use psychological tests for team selection. While psychological tests can be helpful, it's not a determinant of success. An example would be that the NFL, National Football League, gives a test called the Wonderlic test to draftees. These are college players, juniors and seniors who want to get drafted into the NFL. And the scores range on a scale of 1 being the lowest to 50 being the highest. So it's expected that low scores equal bad decision making and high scores equal good decision making. That's fine, but that doesn't always equal a good player. Using personality inventories alone to select athletes for a team or to cut athletes from a team is an abuse of testing. It's critically important when using psychological measures to include explanation and feedback. Never just explanation and never just feedback, but to use both. High quality feedback, that's feedback that's complete and relevant and from the right people, can have a tremendous impact on the athlete or sport exerciser. It helps to be open and upfront and honest about the test beforehand. Athletes, students, and exercisers should be told the purpose of the tests and what they measure. Afterwards, athletes and sport exercisers should receive specific feedback about the results. Feedback that allows the athletes to gain an insight into themselves and not just broad generalizations. Most importantly, when using psychological measures is to assure athletes of confidentiality. This fear of exposure causes individuals to fake answers and to have sort of a bias, a competency bias when taking these kind of tests. To do that, take an intra-individual approach. This is when you compare an athlete to themselves only, how they perform during stressful situations versus non-stressful situations, how they perform under duress versus how they typically feel, not how they compare to other athletes, either in their sport, their contemporaries now, or how they compare to other athletes historically.